involvement began on December 2nd of 2021, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You were out of town on November 30th. Is it safe to say you were aware of the shooting that occurred at Oxford High School on November 30th prior
Yes.
to your involvement?
Yes.
Now, your involvement was as the sergeant of the Fugitive Apprehension Team.
Correct.
That's also called FAP, is that correct?
Correct.
You testified that unit is responsible for locating people with felony warrants or wanted for serious crimes.
Correct.
Your unit did not get involved in all felony warrant arrests, is that fair?
I'm not sure I understand what you
Sure. All felony warrant arrests in Oakland County, your unit did not go and arrest everybody who has a felony warrant. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. And your unit did not get involved with all crimes that people were arrested for. Is that fair?
That's fair.
And let me clarify. So we know, and we heard some testimony previously, that there was a warrant issued by the court, correct?
Correct.
In this case, correct? And based on your experience, you were a law enforcement officer for 34 years, you were a detective for a number of years. You know that somebody who's accused of a crime and charged can walk themselves into a court, correct?
Correct.
With or without an attorney, right?
Correct.
And that includes for felonies.
Correct.
Their attorney, you're aware that there have been times where their attorney has arranged, sometimes with the detective, sometimes with the prosecutor's office, in various ways. Their attorney can arrange for them to be turned in to the court or the police department on a specific day and time. Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay. The other ways are involving your former unit,
Correct.
and that's done by law enforcement. The attorneys don't call you up and say, hey, can you come get my client? That's the police who say, go get this person.
Correct.
And then obviously other agencies can get involved with our other arrests as well. Is that fair?
Yes.
In this situation, your involvement was requested prior to Mr. Crumbley being charged.
Yes.
You testified that your involvement was December 2nd of 2021.
Yes.
You were contacted, and I don't know if this was clear, you were contacted by Lieutenant Willis.
Yes.
He contacted you on December 2nd of 2021 and asked you to locate James and Jennifer Crumbley.
Yes.
Now, did you learn as part of your involvement or as part of getting that initial information that there were some concerns? Well, let me go back. You're aware that after the Oxford High School shooting that people were scared. Is that fair? I'm talking people in general.
Possibly. I would assume.
Angry?
Sure.
Upset?
Sure.
It was very public what had happened on November 30th of 2021.
Yes.
The shooter's name became public shortly after the shooting.
Yes.
If you recall, and you may not know, but if you don't know, please say you don't know, that Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley's residence was made public.
That I don't.
Did you learn during your involvement in this case that there were some concerns over the safety of James and Jennifer Crumbley because they were the parents of the Oxford High School shooter?
I was never made aware of that.
So all you were made aware of was that James and Jennifer Crumbley needed to be located.
Yes.
And the first place you went was their residence.
Yes.
They weren't there.
Correct.
You eventually determined and learned that they had been at a hotel in Auburn Hills from November 30th to December 3rd, the morning of December 3rd.
I'm not sure if they were there that entire time, but that's where we ended up finding the vehicle, was at that hotel.
And did you also learn through your involvement that they registered at that hotel in Jennifer Crumbley's name?
I don't specifically remember whose name it was.
So you began looking for James and Jennifer Crumbley before they were formally charged.
Correct.
Now, I assume in your career you've been involved in what would be considered high-profile or media cases, is that correct?
Yes.
And oftentimes in those cases, is it standard practice for your department to take someone into custody before the actual charges are announced?
Depends on the crime and the circumstances surrounding it.
your department often, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your department will often assume that a high-profile case or a serious offense that somebody might run.
It is a possibility, people do.
You had no information that James Crumbley had indicated that he was going to run away or flee or anything like that. Is that fair? On December 2nd of 2021.
That's fair.
You were aware that James and Jennifer Crumbley did not have their phones after November 30th of 2021 because they had been either given to or taken by law enforcement, but law enforcement had them in their possession.
Yes.
Did you also learn during your early involvement in this case, or at any point, that James and Jennifer Crumbley had obtained track phones or pay-as-you-go phones or things like that?
Yes.
And did you learn during your involvement in this case that those phones were obtained because James and Jennifer wanted to be able to contact family in the early days after the shooting?
I was not aware of the reason behind obtaining those phones.
Did you also learn during your involvement in this case that James and Jennifer Crumbley obtained additional phones in the same phone number of the phones that were given to law enforcement?
I did learn that, but I don't remember at what point in our investigation I learned
Said that charges were formally announced at approximately noon on December 3rd of 2021.
that. That's my understanding, yes.
You do not know whether or not James and Jennifer knew that those charges had been formally announced. Is that fair?
That's fair.
You said that you went to James and Jennifer's attorney's office and you talked to an attorney.
I did.
That was not me, correct?
It was not.
Some hours later, you were notified that that one of their vehicles was located in a business parking lot in Detroit.
Correct.
It was not a parking garage, is that fair?
Yes.
It was not underground parking.
No.
It was not indoor parking.
No.
It was a gated parking lot. We can see the fence in the photo, correct?
Correct.
There weren't boxes or branches or anything covering their vehicle. Their vehicle was in the parking lot.
Correct.
And at some point during your involvement between December 2nd and December 3rd, were you also made aware that there were going to be some attempts to do an alternative to what we talked about earlier when it comes to turning somebody in, that Mr. Crumbley may be walking himself in to be arraigned on the warrant after he'd been made aware of it, if you recall those conversations?
I had conversations with an attorney, but I'm not sure what I can go in.
Yes, and I'm not asking you about the details of the conversation. Just if you had some knowledge that there was an indication that Mr. Crumbley was not running, but that he was in fact going to turn himself in. Again, without giving.
Yeah.
Judge, I would object to this whole line of questioning. I think it's getting close to speculating what the purpose of what a hearsay conversation would be, and it could open the door to other things.
Well, yeah, are you going to open the door to that?
I can move on, Judge.
All right.
At no point during your involvement in this case were you told James Crumbley is absolutely avoiding these charges and will not be turning himself in. At no point were you told that.
There's the same question, same objection to the same question, just asked differently.
Well, and who is he being told that by?
It could be anybody, Your Honor. His involvement was requested by Lieutenant Willis. He had multiple police officers involved. There were multiple people involved in locating Mr. Crumbley. I'm just asking if he was ever given knowledge that was going to happen.
Just as a response, he testified to what his job was. He was given an assignment, and he carried it out.
Well, I don't know, I guess you got to be careful what you wish for, right?
Thank you, Judge.
Yeah, you know.
You indicated that the building where Mr. Crumbley's vehicle was a quote-unquote three-story industrial building, as I believe what you called it.
Yes.
That was Exhibit 307, which is on the screen. In that building, obviously from the outside, it looks kind of like a warehouse. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
But you learned during your involvement that there were multiple tenants in that building.
Yes, multiple suites
Right.
or rooms.
Businesses,
Yes.
people who were regularly in and out of that building.
That I can't answer to. It was very late and there was nobody in and out when we were there.
Okay. Did you learn during your involvement that there were people in and out during the day that day?
Not at the time I was there.
Okay. And you may not be the right witness to ask these questions of. I'm just trying to determine what exactly you knew about this building.
Yeah, at that point, at that hour of the night, there was nobody coming in and out. And we wouldn't have allowed anybody to come in or out anyway.
And you learned in going into the building that there was an option for interior parking. Did you learn that?
I don't recall there being any interior parking, like a parking garage, if that's what you mean.
Right. Like a way to pull a vehicle in through a garage and park it inside instead of out in the lot.
There was a loading dock, so I guess technically you could have pulled a car inside of there, but I did not see, it was not a designated indoor parking structure.
Right. So not like a parking garage or those underground parking like we were talking about earlier.
Correct.
Okay. Your testimony was that it was obvious and apparent what was going on outside of and in that building during your search of the building, correct?
Yes.
Now, you can't say, because you really have no idea what James Crumbley heard or saw that night, correct? On December 3rd of 2021, or the early morning hours of December 4th of 2021.
I can only tell you what I saw and heard, and the commotion, the law enforcement officers, the flashing lights from the police cars, but specifically as to what he saw and heard, I can't tell you.
Right. You have no knowledge of whether or not he saw or heard any of that. Is that fair?
Yeah.
You were not part of the arrest of James Crumbley after entry was made by DPD's SRT unit, correct?
Correct.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Reader.
Thank you. Sir, who were you given this assignment by?
Lieutenant Wilkes.
Okay. And you were asked to locate James Crumbley on December the 2nd, not arrest him on December the 2nd. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's not uncommon for an officer in charge to contact the fugitive apprehension team to locate a suspect, is it?
No, that's not uncommon at all.
Okay. And the goal is the member of the fugitive apprehension team is a peaceful surrender?
Yes,
Okay. Is that why you reached out to Mr. Crumbley's attorneys?
absolutely.
Okay. And there were no arrangements made to you to turn the defendant in on Friday, December the 3rd, were there?
No.
Nothing.